Okay, good morning, good moyed. Just silencing my phone. You don't want to be in the embarrassing situation when you're talking about social media being the worst enemy, and then your phone starts ringing, That has happened. So, what's the formal title? Is it social media? Is it our most dangerous enemy? So everything is hashgacha pratis, right? Divine providence. So I'm sitting this morning by breakfast, and next table to us, so suddenly the woman turns to me and says, "Everybody's on their phone. Rabbi, you have any solution for this craze, this addiction? Everybody's on their phone. Can't get anyone's attention." So I said, I'm about to give a talk about that. Now I have an opening line. It's seriously, just talking about it. So I can't resist the temptation. My story, well, one of many, but one that captures so well. So I was, a few years ago, being driven to a wedding, like a 2.5 hour drive from New York. And in the back seat, me was a old friend. We went to school together. And we were friends, but everybody diverges, very different. So I thought we have a good opportunity to catch up and talk. But he's on his phone, texting. So I patiently wait, and it was a long ride. But I realized, forget about it. It's not happening. So, and I try to elbow him and make him a little uncomfortable. Can't get his attention. I wasn't desperate, to be honest. I was just being friendly. So you know what I ended up doing? I ended up texting him. Promise you. I'm sitting right near the guy, and I texted him. And I see, he looks at his text. I finally got his attention. And then he looks at me, and he's wondering, is this a fresh text, or is this some, old text that just popped up? And then he says to me, "Are you texting me?" So I said, "Yeah." He says, "Well, you're sitting right near me." I said, "Yeah, I can't get your damn attention." "What do you mean?" I'm sitting right. He says, "Okay, so now you'll wait your turn." Fine. So, I know it's just a little light humor here, but the truth is, I think about it myself all the time. I'm on the phone. We all have our addictions, and we see it as emancipation, that it's freed us from so much. You have access of all information in the world, anytime, anywhere. From my point of view, the work I do has dramatically changed the reach, the distribution, broadcast. I have in my house a built-in studio. Whenever I have a cosmic itch, I just sit down in the chair and I begin to broadcast, either live or recorded. So I know the benefits of it acutely myself. And I'm sure you all have benefits in all different ways, whether it's professional or personal but at the same time, as everything in life, everything that creates opportunities also creates challenges. So a number of years ago, I had come up with an idea of creating a type of app, a meaningful app, we called it. It would help people, just like people have time management apps, calendars and schedules, or CRMs or Salesforce, whatever it is that helps organize their contacts and their appointments. And then there are financial apps like Mint and others that help you organize your finances. So we came up with an idea, maybe we could help people organize their lives and finding deeper meaning. You plug in the coordinates of your life, your goals, what you're looking for, your obstacles, your challenges, and perhaps create something like that to help people look at each day and make their day a richer day, a more meaningful day, more focused day. And we then hit an obstacle that none of us anticipated. Because a lot of these apps, the way they work well is they feed off the users. You can come up with all the brilliant ideas, but really it's constantly in a type of beta, meaning it's always being experimented with and tested. Like Google's greatness ultimately comes, the more people that make queries and ask questions, the better they refine their search engines. So you're always feeding off people. The more people respond, the better your response will be, which makes total sense. In our case, the programmers and the developers were saying, so we want to give people's information, not necessarily private, whatever they share, they want to share, they share. But one of the things that was really important was to get how you're spending your day. Like if you don't know that, it's very hard to give anyone guidance if someone's not. And it became notoriously impossible for people to want to share how they spend their day. And I'm not talking because they're doing anything really that they're embarrassed of, but the amount of wasted time, especially playing video games and other things that seem so innocuous, nobody wanted to share how meaningless so many hours go away in their time. So you could never get a real honest response. If someone asked you, so monitor your day and tell me how many hours did you spend on your phone doing absolutely things that were worthless. Most of us will not want to see. We don't want to know. As a matter of fact, I think on iPhones, maybe on Androids too, you can actually see that. You can see the time that you spend on which app and so on and so forth. You don't want to know because it's quite, you suddenly find out, 6 hours I spent on Candy Crush. Candy Crush. I mean, it's like has no... Okay, you're a Candy Crush addict? Secret addict? But everybody's got their thing. And therefore, the whole idea could never really take off because nobody was going to tell you. And again, it's not because they're doing something really criminal. It's embarrassing to know that a third of your wake hours you were whatever, bored and just browsing along. So, how many of you in my talk that I gave during the Yom Tov about AI? So I'm not going to go over it again, but just briefly, I just speak a lot about how technology has freed up a lot of time, which is obvious. You don't have to go to a mall right now. You could actually order. Right before Yom Tov, my wife, my daughter, they ordered a bunch of stuff, and the next hour, we already had it. So the hour drive back and forth and the shopping and all that, what we do with that extra time. So most of us are not that calculated. Extra time, we always find a way to fill extra time. Around here, there's not a problem because between the tea room and lunch and breakfast and the barbecue, just walking from one to the other, you pretty had your day filled. Right? Am I wrong? And then add a few more things. So there are people I know personally that every second is counted. I remember I have someone who works for us. He comes from Jerusalem. So he had a grandfather who was a Holocaust survivor. Every second of his day was calculated. I was amazed to the point he told me that after his grandfather passed away, they were sitting Shiva. So his father was spoken about his father. He said, my father was so calculated in time that one day he calls me and says, I just finished Shas for, the zillionth time, and I have the next few months, I have 15 minutes in the day that is empty, and I need to, is there something I can, I hear that at Chabad, the Rebbe Institute is learning Rambam. So he can give me more details about it. He has 15 minutes, he said in Yiddish, 15 minutes befreit bei ihm. 15 minutes were emptied. I was like, imagine, what would you do if you had 15 minutes free? You're calling to fill that in. I mean, so there are people that have that ability. And it's not just like yekas, which are people who are just so like clerks, precise. They just don't waste time. I don't know. I guess I can't say that. Even though people think I have every second of my day I'm doing so many broadcasts. But I waste time, plenty of time. And you don't even know what you waste on. So now we have more free time and more all these luxuries. So what is it all doing to us? And as it is in the case in all these situations, as Warren Buffett says, that you don't know who's been swimming naked until the tide is out. When the tide is in, everybody can be swimming, everybody looks successful. The tide is out, suddenly everyone's exposed. And that's what happens. It's like It either brings out the best in us or brings out the worst in us. And that's what one of the points I was making in that talk. Here, obviously, I want to take a different angle, discuss more of social media. But it's not just social media. To me, everything is, at the end of the day, is the human psychology. Because it's not just the technology. There are many people who can give you a good talk on developments in AI or now developments in social media and where we're headed. Most of us are old enough to have seen the changes even in the last 20 years, from dial-up modems to the speeds, and it's only going to accelerate. I mean, we all see the progress. I'm not here, it's not my expertise, and it's also not my interest. I'd rather talk more about the human dimension, what it's doing to us. So I will say this, a few observations, and then we'll talk more about how we can perhaps get more control over our lives and use technology instead of it using us. And that is one observation that I've noticed as someone who's now, I guess, over 40 years in the work I do, which is teaching and writing and speaking, counseling, and dealing with the human condition. So I've personally witnessed, as an adult, the major shift. Just to give you a little background. So when I began working, my job was then at the time, my first so-called stint was working on Sefer Likutim of the Tzemach Tzedek, which was an Hasidic encyclopedia. So I was a student. I was around 19, 20 years old, and it was a research project, really, and I learned a lot from it. So then copy machines were already coming on the scene, but not plain paper copy. You know, those chalk paper, remember that? Those rolls. That paper that was like, I don't even know what it was. It was like coated paper that faded. What was it called?
Stencil?
Not stencil. I'm talking about a copy machine, not a carbon, not anyway, whatever it was. And we basically used all the primitive tools. Like, mail was delivered by camels and donkeys and dinosaurs. And then when I began working for the Lubavitch Rebbe, it was as a oral scribe, as we were called, which was a kachoizer maniach, remembering and documenting. So remembering, obviously, no technology could replace that, even today. Yeah, you could have tape recorders and you have recording machines and audio devices, but processing and working on it. So I used a good old typewriter. You all have seen a typewriter in your lives, right? No, I'm saying it. It's not you look old enough to have seen a typewriter, but most people have never seen a typewriter. Where do you see typewriters today? In museums. So I use a typewriter. The whole thing, you type, you have to change ribbons and whiteouts, write out, and there's white paper. The whole thing to get. And if you miss a paragraph, either you got to retype the whole page, or you got to start cutting it with razors. You know the job. In our case, also the final product needed also superscript and numbers. So there's no superscript in typewriters. So someone had to really cut and paste these little things, and they needed wax. I don't know if you know the whole publishing process before it became so convenient. Desktop publishing didn't exist. So that's where I was. And I was an adult working with a typewriter. I remember the evolution from a typewriter. The first time I saw a word processor, which was like magic. Suddenly you type it once, you never have to type it again. You can edit it again and again. You can manipulate paragraphs. Things that today are so common, we don't even see it as. Then it was quite spectacular, actually. It was saved hours of work. And then I remember the advent of the fax machine, and which, believe it or not, was probably one of the biggest revolutions at the time. Because, to deliver a document, you could only have FedEx or overnight or whatever it was. Here, a document can just be transmitted electronically. I don't know if you know this, just for the record, that all the big technology companies rejected the technology because it was all coming from the government. The government had developed it, including the internet. And then after a while, they started either sharing it with universities, like it is with the web, and then later became commercialized. So they would offer it to AT&T, to IBM. They all rejected faxes. They said, no one's going to want faxes. So that's where Canon became a big company, and others, Toshiba, because they grabbed this new technology and they turned it into mega companies, because it did something tremendous. And then fax machines and broadcast fax. It's only in the mid-90s that email and internet really began. I know it sounds funny, actually, because it's not that long ago. And things changed dramatically. So I say it because I just want to give you a sense that I was like literally there, and my work was affected by it. And what's interesting, in my case, it's not like we had deep pockets and we could invest in technology. It actually was necessary. For us, if I was able to produce a document a day earlier, 2 days earlier, it was a dramatic difference, because there would be people waiting for it to get it. Or if it can be delivered quickly. So these things, I was always insisting that we always get the best technologies, so we grew with it. I literally grew with it. So I was never impressed by it as a gimmick. To me, it was efficiency. When the internet came on board and email, it was just efficiency. You suddenly can deliver your content faster and to more people. YouTube probably was, at least for my work, maybe the biggest revolution, because suddenly videos, and this videos wasn't just the video distribution, it was the video storage. Before Google bought YouTube, you have to know if any storage cost a lot of money, and videos are very heavy files. They're not text files. So it was impossible to have 1,000 videos. You'd have to spend millions of dollars. I'm not exaggerating. That was the amount of storage. Google and YouTube suddenly changed all of that. I have probably 10,000 videos up. That would be, I don't know what expense it would be, and it's completely free. So that changed simply the amount of information that can be stored in the cloud, guaranteed. It will never disappear. You're dealing with YouTube. And of course, distribution is a whole other level. You suddenly have the whole world. I can just tell you, just to give you a little sense of my own work, just in the last few months, it's like skyrocketed, where we have probably close to 1 million unique viewers a week. 1 million viewers. So there are 1,000 guests here at this program. You can do the math. So imagine 1,000 times 1,000, right? So it's been exploding, and so I see it as only a tremendous advantage. I need to qualify this because we're not here just to talk about devices. The opportunities are enormous. And literally, there's no way that you could reach millions and billions of people with Torah, with words of wisdom, with words of inspiration. Today it's completely possible, and it's all free. That's the most amazing part. It's free. You have to pay for production, you have to pay perhaps for some other things, but the main bulk of it, which is storage and delivery and distribution, it's really literally free. So I see that as messianic in every possible way. In a few days from now, we're going to be reading in the Haftarah of Isaiah's prophecy, where he says about the messianic times, that powerful statement. He says there'll be a world, there'll be no longer evil and destruction, because it will be a world filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. Whenever I used to read that, or hear it, I used to always think, how was it possible in those days? Nothing existed that could fill the world with divine knowledge as the waters cover the sea. It would have to be a complete miracle. Today, you hear that line? Yeah, that's the information revolution. We have all the machinery that we need for it. It's just a matter of time, or a matter of just reaching. But the pipelines are all there. They're laid out. We don't have to spend any money on that. You just have to get the information into those pipelines and get it to the people. So in that sense, it is messianic, but at the same time, then why is it can be so addictive and so destructive in a way, both personally, psychologically, emotionally, and can't neglect mentioning, of course, even on a global scale. Look, social media, in many ways, can mobilize terrorists. It can mobilize very nefarious forces in ways that you were never able to do before. I mean, I'm only loath to think what Hitler and the Nazis would have accomplished with their propaganda. They had also such technologies. It changes warfare, information. Even now we know, whether it's China or it's Russia or Ukraine, or for that matter the West, this is like tremendous investment in information and misinformation, which can so easily be manipulated. You can spread any rumor almost. You ever saw the movie Wag the Dog? You know that one? Where just to get an example, it's a comedy, but it's also a tragedy, where they're trying to cover up some president's crimes because election is about to come, so they need to have some major distraction. So they hire this Hollywood PR company, brilliant, and they came up with this idea. I mean, it's quite funny. I just found it to be just hilarious, actually. They come up with an idea, they're going to fabricate a war. Just to give you a sense, a war. And where's this war being fought? So they're just sitting in like the eeny, meeny, miny, mo, throwing dice. Where should we put a war? And so they have to find a place that's obscure enough that Albania. Very few, everyone heard of Albania, but no one's ever been there. So they make a war in Albania. And they literally go into a studio and they film a whole fabricated war. And you see them doing it. They hire an actress, and she's running, and then they put fireworks behind her. And so, it's quite funny, right? And they fabricate a war. And of course, how do you begin a rumor? So one of the PR people in the White House says, it's easy to begin a rumor. You just deny that the rumors being spread about a war in Albania are absolutely groundless. And of course, that makes it a war. Because why are they saying that? Best lie is you just say, it never happened. You don't say it happened, because if you say it happened, they'll check. You just say, no, there's no basis for it. It's a good idea of how you want to create misinformation. Just say, there's no basis for it. All that you've been hearing about our marriage is untrue. Like that. So, the point I'm making here is how you can manipulate. And with fickle minds like ourselves, and also impressionable, and good media productions, and I think most of us have come to become aware, especially the Trump era and then COVID era. Who knows what's the facts? I don't know if anybody can tell me what the facts are. CNN says it's a fact. Fox says it's a fact. Or they have a monopoly on the facts. And then you start realizing that we're dealing with, anyone can say anything. I know once we used to think that the media everything was fact-checking, and you don't just publish something. I come from a family of journalists. My father was a journalist. I recently just did a little research. I read some very sensitive articles in the New York Times, Wall Street Journal. I promise you, in an article, I did not find one source. Every source was either anonymous, or they didn't want to comment, or someone else is commenting for them. And they say that because they want to be transparent. So they say, but then end up being at the end of the article, check it out. Take any article you like. Almost in every case, I'm talking about sensitive matter. I'm not talking about something like if it's going to rain tomorrow. I don't think they use anonymous sources for that, or whatever. But and I was amazed. So the newspapers, what they do is they cover their tracks by saying we called, but there was no response. So it's as if that's the source. So I'm not suggesting, I'm not a conspiracy theory guy where every article is made up and so on. Even though my grandfather did tell me, he was always very dismissive of all these modern technologies. And my father was a journalist and he liked to jab him a bit. So my grandfather would always say, everything in the newspaper is a lie. Everything. I said, Zayda, this is America here. It's not Russia. There's no censorship. There's no propaganda. I was a kid. He used to look at me with these eyes. I thought he was living. He said to me, well, you grow up, you'll find out. Even the date on the newspaper is a lie. They printed it last night. That's what he told me. And I thought about it. That's right. I said, so, in other words, everything, and then you grow older, you start realizing, I'm going to say everything is a lie. I'm not going to say that. But who decides what's an important article? What you're going to see? The front page of something. Who decided that? And again, I'm not suggesting that they're malicious. But someone subjective decided that. They think this is important. Maybe if I knew all the headlines, I would have decided something else is important. So you have to take everything with a grain of salt. Now throw in technology and social media, and the whole thing gets accelerated into a whole new world. Because everything is now exponentially multiplied and can spread in a second. In a second. I remember my father-in-law traveled to Moscow. This is mid-'80s or early '80s. And he came back with a newspaper. There's an English newspaper that the Russians print for English-speaking people. And I kid you not, this is exactly what I saw in the newspaper. The cover of the page, the headline was, "Last residents of New York move out." And there's a picture of a dark street with one light bulb about to go out. They tell the story of New York. Now remember, in Russia there was no other information. No one could counter it. No one said, "1 second, I see pictures of New York and it's thriving." They could easily say those are Hollywood pictures. And that was the article. Last residents of New York move out due to the crime, due to the terror. It was and I realized, wow, it's amazing what you can do. And then, of course, I was reminded of the fact that Pravda, the Russian newspaper, do you know what Pravda means in Russian? Truth. Truth. Now tell me, would you trust a newspaper that calls itself Truth? Nothing but the truth. And then the Yiddish communist newspaper years ago was called Emes. Emes. But interestingly, you know how it was spelled? Ayin Mem, Ayin Samach. Not Aleph Mem Taf. Ayin Mem, Ayin Samach. And I was saying to myself, one second, it's every letter is a typo there. Then I realized maybe the editor-in-chief was hinting to the Jews, like a wink, I'm being paid to do this, I can't tell you. So he just misspelled the whole thing. The Russians would never know. So every time you look at the newspaper, you see how Emes is spelled. You can imagine that nothing in this newspaper is Emes, basically. It's like if someone wants to send you a message and they can't tell you it's a lie, they'll write to you and say, "This is the truth," and truth is spelled, let's say, Tuslm. So you pretty much get the message. So this is the power of miscommunication and manipulation. And if you add into the equation really malicious intentions, it's absolutely destructive. But even if it's not malicious, you come away thinking, when you're younger, you think, okay, you have objective truths out there, scientists are truthful officially. Then you start finding out about this forgery and that fabrication. This one wanted to make a name for himself. I don't want to go away feeling that everything we hear is not true, but how do you filter? You're going to start saying, okay, let's get the people who are supposed to be the guards, the guardians of the truth. And look what happened. All these regulatory commissions, they themselves are corrupt. So the ones that are supposed to be regulating need their own regulators. Like a guy told me once, he says, don't ever go to court because it's not paying lawyers. You have to pay 2 sets of lawyers. One, the lawyers you're hiring, and the other lawyers to watch those lawyers. That they're not overbilling and that they're doing it right and so on. And then I'm sure you have to then hire a third to watch the second. So you got yourself, insurance over for your insurance to cover the insurance. Is this correct, more or less? Man of experience right here. So I've been somewhat painting the picture. But where does that leave us? That's the real question here. Okay, so where are we left? We're left with is that left at our own devices, our own accord. It's pretty complicated. It's very difficult to really make heads or tails. But we're left with also another thing. We have, thank God, a soul, and we have minds, and we are not necessarily victims, or have to be victims of all this that's going on out there. So first of all, you have to have your own life. The media and information, technology is not going to create a life for you. Anyway, that thinks that's the case, it's going to be in a rude awakening. And unfortunately, those of us that don't have an inner identity or have not developed one will be the most susceptible and most vulnerable to technology and social media. So it's not a surprise. And it's not a surprise as well why many parents are concerned, see their children completely consumed with social media. And again, it could be very innocent, and many times it's nice. You You have a place to connect with your friends. But it could also be if you hit the wrong place and there are predators out there and other forces, it's dangerous, frankly. So the first solution to all of this is you have to find yourself independent of your machines. Machines are not going to replace the search for truth, and they're not going to replace the search for meaning, search for transcendence. It's a recurrent theme that I've spoken about many of my talks here, and in general, because when you live in a world with so many gadgets, you have to separate yourself from them, which of course only emphasizes how powerful Shabbos is and Yom Tov, where we do unplug. I was at a Shabbaton where almost everybody there were not did not grow up Shabbos observant. This was the first time they experienced Shabbos, and one of the suggestions was, nobody imposes, to just unplug. They had a box right in the front of the center where people gathered. Put your phone there. Recharge. They had recharges, so you could also recharge. And it's not just that. And everyone did it. I mean, I can't say everyone. I'm sure some people, emergency workers or whatever it may be. But the point was, it was part of the experience. And I was asking people, and they loved it. They loved it. First of all, the novelty. One guy said to me, I don't know if I could do this every week, but once in a while, it sounds like a good idea. And it was the novelty. And also, it forces you to have a conversation with someone. And you can't escape. You can't say, I got to check, or I have a Zoom, or I have this or that. And it created much more human relations. So from a Jewish perspective, in a way, you can make a very good, powerful case for Shabbos today more than ever, because of all the explosion of and proliferation of technologies. But the essence of the meaning is, find yourself. You need to know who you are. They tell this Chelem joke. Chelem is this town of fools. Or they say they were wise people, but the neighbors were resentful, so they created this whole folklore of Chelem. So one guy fell in Chelem who was suffering from an identity crisis. He doesn't know who he is. So he decides, so he goes to the mikveh, the ritual bath, like before Shabbos, and before he's about to get totally undressed and immerse himself, he says, 1 second here, how am I going to know who I am? I know my clothing, I identify by my garments. Once I go into the mikveh, I come out, how am I going to know who I am? You have to use a little imagination here. It's a little, so he ties a little red thread to his toe. Now don't ask me the halachic question if that's a chatzitza, that's not the point of the story. Just bear with me, And ties a red thread, but God helps. The red thread gets untied and attaches itself to someone else's toe. And he comes out and he starts looking for the red thread. That's his ID. And he finds it. So he goes over to the other guy. He says, I know who you are, but who am I? So this is one of those used in recovery and healing. I know it sounds ridiculous, but if you think about it, we all have certain elements of that, where we identify by certain external ideas, and when they're taken from us, like I said, when the tide is out, you're left, so who am I? What identifies me? And it's all of us need to ask that question, because we live in a world where we are. I mean, how many masks do you have stored away for different people and different occasions? You meet one person, you have a certain face you show, another person a different face. We all have our armor, we have our defense mechanisms, and not always bad. You don't have to be always wear your heart in your sleeve with everyone you meet. We maneuver, and the people we trust more see more of us. People we trust less, or we first get to know, we're going to have much more. We're going to be more defensive. So I remember once speaking about this. I remember a guy gets up and he says, something? Because I made a comment something like that sometimes you wear armor so often that you become your armor and you forget who's inside because you don't let anyone in and you don't let yourself out, which is essentially people who have been hurt. That's what they do. You've been hurt psychologically or emotionally, so you don't want to be vulnerable again. You don't want to be hurt again. So what do? You put up armor. You put up protection. But remember, protection works both ways. No one can get in, but are you getting out? So then you become your protection. And I remember he got up and he said, exactly my life story. I become my armor. That's who I am. I'm this guy, everything, I have it all worked out, everything's figured out. I'll never be hurt because I have so many layers, but I'll never be, period, either. So it's critical to discover yourself. I think COVID, frankly, was a good example. It brought out the worst in some people. Those people who identified their lives by the restaurants they went through, and what sports and what vacations and so on, and that was the essence of their excitement, then suddenly all that was disrupted. You can imagine it can create quite a upheaval. But for many others, and I saw it, I witnessed it on Zoom, mind you, not in person, but I witnessed it all the time, that there are others that became an opportunity. I remember Pesach. Remember that Pesach 2020? All the programs were canceled. We were all alone. You couldn't even have your children. My mother, my father passed away a number of years ago. She would always go to grandchildren. She ended up being in a home. So yeah, we came to visit her on the porch and all these things, and we helped her sell her stuff. But suddenly, one guy told me, it's the first time I spent Pesach with my wife alone. And we were terrified. We wouldn't know what's going to happen here. There's no grandchildren to distract us, and there's no excuses. Now we just got to do it. And then he told me afterwards it was the most beautiful experience. Because even the first year, usually you go Pesach to your in-laws, as we all do, or to your parents, and they take care of everything. So these type of circumstances create, when you're stripped from all the gadgets and the armor and all the defense, and I'm including everything into this, you now have to be yourself, By Chassidim, there was the concept of going yechidus to a Rebbe. You're going yechidus. The word yechidus is an interesting word. It means, it's like singular, it's totally, yechidus is like alone. From the word yachid. You're alone with your Rebbe. No one else is there. So in Hasidic language, it's called like your yechida is meeting the yechida of the Rebbe. So in the soul levels of a person, there's nefesh, ruach, neshama, chai, yechida. Basically 5 different levels of expression of your soul. Where nefesh is more your biological life, ruach is more of your emotional life, and neshama is your intellectual life, yechai is your transcendent life, and yechida is the innermost, most intimate part of who you are. And you're meeting the most intimate part of a tzaddik, of a very refined person. And there's a certain type of, and essentially it's this concept, it's like stripping yourself of everything, all the armor and all the defenses. So I remember, it was years ago, I heard this story from a doctor that came from, was he Cleveland? Somewhere in Midwest, Cleveland, Chicago, one of those cities. I know New Yorkers just dismiss everything as these Chicago, Cleveland, and he told me that he was traveling to New York. He was a secular Jew, at least ostensibly, and one of the rabbis told him, when you go to New York, if you can, it was the mid-60s, it'd be a good idea to go visit the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Okay. So he called the offices, and they gave him a meeting. He had a scheduled evening that he came. And he was a skeptic. So he came in, the Rebbe offered him a chair. He sits down, and he's quiet. He doesn't even know why he's there, frankly. So the Rebbe says to him, is there anything on your mind? He said, not really. I mean, I was told to come here. It's like one of the things. You're visiting the Empire State Building. You're visiting other places. You should visit Crown Heights. And you meet the Rebbe. He's a great man. So I'm here. He didn't tell me what to do once I come here. So the Rebbe smiled and said to him, I understand. I don't like to impose myself, especially someone that doesn't want to be here. I'm not looking here you don't have to stay. But since you're already here, maybe there is something on your mind you want to talk about. That's what he tells him. So he says, yeah, why don't you tell me who you are? What is a Rebbe? Why do these people talk about you in such glowing terms? He said it, I guess, respectfully, or, so like, what's your story? What would you say, Rabbi, if you were a Rebbe? It's a good question, right? And the Rebbe's answer is unbelievable. He said to him, I try to be a friend. I try to be a friend to people. So the doctor became like very, he says, a friend? I have so many friends. What's the big thing of being a friend? We have friends all over. Now the Rebbe said, let me define what a friend is. And then you'll tell me how many friends you have. A friend is someone that you could speak to like you speak to yourself. You don't have, there's no airs, there's no defensiveness, there's no fear of being judged. You speak like you speak to yourself. You're completely vulnerable because you trust this person, and they can You can open up, and they'll just be there for you. And they have no agenda and no strings attached. The doctor's listening. He was an intelligent man. He says, if that's your definition, I don't have that many friends. I don't even know if I have one such friend. And the Rebbe says, so that's what I try to be. I can't say I'm always successful, but that's what I try to be. Now this man ultimately became a chassid and evolved in his own way. But I heard the story from him. And I found it to be both very simple and of course very profound. Because it's not, you'd usually think a Rebbe, a tzaddik, he can part the sea. He's going to create miracles. You come down to it, it really comes down to just being the most human possible, like what a healthy mother is. What's a healthy mother? When her newborn is born, she cradles her child without any airs, without any agendas. I'm saying healthy. And completely, I'm here for you completely, to love you unconditionally, to nurture you, and to help you become who you should be. Now, it's so rare because everybody's got agendas in the world. Everybody has stuff. The classic example, these two guys go camping, and middle of the night, one guy says to his friend, we got to get out of here. There's a bear outside, scurrying about, coming to look for food. Bears can be dangerous, right? And while he's telling his friend, we got to run, he's tying his sneakers quickly. So his friend says to him, what do you think, you can outrun the bear? He says, no, all I have to do is outrun you. This is called survival of the fittest. The exact opposite is what I'm describing. To being with a person, with people who don't have any such agendas. And they are there completely. Now, I know it sounds like, what's that have to do with social media? Well, it has everything to do. Because social media and technology and all of that is part of creating, whether it's armor or distractions, or even if it's tools. Let's say it's the best tool chest on earth. But you know what? You don't marry your tool chest. That's not where you're going to find intimacy. You don't become bonded to your tool chest. It's a sophisticated tool chest that has a use, and it could be, as I described earlier, it could be tremendous use. And actually, if you do have a relationship with someone, a good one, and they're traveling, technology allows you to connect with them because there's an end to it. I was 2 years ago. I went to the ground zero of technology, of social media, Silicon Valley, right there in Palo Alto, in Northern California, and I spoke there, and there was a bunch of social media guys. People made a lot of money, young people. It's really happy cracking there. I mean, that place is. And I said to these people, I said, none of you look very social, You created social media. They said, what are you talking? Don't you know? You don't know the secret? Social media is created by antisocial people. We had to create something that we create the illusion of social. We never have to meet anyone. Like Mark Zuckerberg, he was a shy kid at Harvard, and he created a program where he could meet girls without meeting them, essentially. Or how people can meet without ever having to really be vulnerable. So, and then one guy got up and said, the inner joke that we have here in social media world? He tells me a joke. It's a little, I guess, a morbid joke a bit, but you all heard of the guillotine, right? The guillotine was invented by a guy called Guillotine, the French Revolution. And this was a particularly grotesque way of killing people with a knife. And you stick someone's head in, whatever it's called, scaffold, and the knife comes down and chops off their head. Okay. So this is the joke going on in the social media world. That there was the guy that was the guillotiner, or whatever they're called, executioner. So he had a rule that if the guillotine malfunctions, you're free to go. And that's it. You live. So they have a doctor, a lawyer, and a social media engineer all lined up that were sentenced to death by the guillotine. So the doctor puts his head down. Now this executioner was a particular sadist. So he made you not put your head down, but hit your head up. So you saw the knife come down, which made it much more painful, much more disgusting. That's what I'm saying, a little morbid, but it's a joke. So there's a happy ending. So the doctor lies down, his head is up, the guillotine, blah, blah, blah. He gets stuck in the middle, malfunctions. Okay, he's free. The lawyer, the same thing, malfunctions. Social media guy's lying there, and he's looking, and the knife starts coming down, and he says, I think I know what the problem is. And he starts telling the guy how to fix it. He says, that's social media guys. That they know the problem, but they're going to die as a result. He says, they're called dissonance, detachment. He's going to tell them the problem. He's going to fix the problem. And then what happens next? You don't have a life left. This is what they told me. It was not my joke. It was their joke. So I realized, one second here, and I'm not suggesting everyone in social media is like that. I'm sure that making a lot of money, some of them are pretty savvy and they have it figured out. But there is an element that is true. You see a lot of geniuses, they're excellent up here. But when it gets here, they're very dumb. And they don't want to go there. As a matter of fact, cerebral defenses, like playing chess games and mind games, is one of the best ways to avoid being vulnerable. You see this all the time. People are very smart. They know how to cover their tracks, and they give you excuses, and they have it all figured out. And you can no way you can corner them because they have it all. Everything has an answer. Everything has an explanation. But when you come down and say to them, "Hey, you want to meet someone and maybe have a beautiful life together and have a family?" No, right now I'm busy making money. They'll give you a reason why not. And what it comes down to is a little scared child that's living in a big brain and doesn't know how to, is unfortunately very hurt usually and wounded. And just to point out, I'm not suggesting everyone that's using social media is there. Just want to point out how disconnected it is from real life. And that's why the contrast with having a real friend, not a social media friend, a real friend, being able to talk to someone eye to eye, heart to heart, no distractions. We're not checking our texts every minute. I find it actually rude, even if everyone's doing it. You sit in an office meeting and everyone's checking their texts. And everyone's doing it, so if everyone's doing it, then it's not rude, right? Officially, it is. It means, but like if you don't have each other's attention. And trust me, I've been guilty of it too. And then I say to myself, it's like really, if you're sitting there talking to someone, why is the person checking their phone? Why am I checking my phone? Emergencies. So we all have our excuses. I always have my excuses. My daughter may need help with her children, even though I know they all went for a trip somewhere. But we all have our excuses lined up. The emergency here, emergency there. But the point is, it's a tremendous challenge and opportunity to find out who you are. That's how I see it at the end of the day, to find out who we are. Regarding the big challenge of social media being used for terrorists, I don't know if we are in the position, each of us, to do anything about that. But we have all the power to do something about our own lives. You don't want to have your worst enemy in your pocket. You don't want to have your worst enemy in your piece of technology. I don't want to say this sounds a little, coming from a rabbi, it's not really good. But someone wrote to my wife once, an email, she says, I sleep with your husband every Sunday night. And my wife, thank God she's secure and so on, but she showed it to me, Now, what was the person watches me every Sunday night. I have a Sunday night program, 8 to 9. They go to sleep with it. Fine, okay. I'm sure there are more than one. So I told my wife, there's a lot of them, don't worry about it. No, but it's a half a joke, but it's not a half a joke, because I can tell you sometimes you counsel people, a couple, and either the wife or the husband will say, my husband or my spouse is sleeping with someone else. With whom? With their phone. So we go into bed, the phone, that's the person. It used to be a television. Now it's a phone. And so with all the jokes aside, it has a truth to it. Where are your loyalties? Now, I'm not an extremist. I understand, we all understand there's certain innocuous and part to this that's not dangerous, but it does challenge us to understand who we truly are. So at the end of the day, all this technology, and it's only going to accelerate and make it more challenging, is challenging our humanity. It's exactly what I said in the AI talk. It's going to ultimately, are we going to rise to the occasion where we really can shine in ways that are unprecedented? That's really the opportunity. I've always, when parents come to me and say, so what's the solution with our children? What do we do with these mobile phones? What age etc. And I don't have a real perfect answer. But as I think about this idea that I'm sharing now, something is coming to me, and I want to share that. The reality is this. I have here, thank God, 5 grandchildren at this program. Some of you have many more. Some of them are here, some are not here. So we see this all the time. I didn't grow up with technology like that. We didn't have no phones. Didn't exist. I didn't get a smartphone until I was in my 30s probably. Simply didn't exist. And now it's there. So let's go through the options. To tell your children it's off limits, it's not something for children, this is adult material, whatever you want to call it, it's not something is almost impossible. Because even if you can pull that off, they have friends. So they go to their friend's house, and now what? So you're going to forbid them from going to their friends that have smartphones? It's not practical. And what are you going to create a pariah, And again, I'm not talking about a child that's a newborn. We're talking about children that are already interacting with other children, go to school. And if the school has computers, and computers are being used in the classroom for gaining, what are you going to say? No? I mean, it's become so common today, it's like a bicycle, it's like a telephone. You no longer can see it. It's not some type of novelty that 1 out of a million people have. So that doesn't seem practical. So then most parents opt for, let's create limits, let's create rules. 3 hours a day, 1 hour a day, after school, after dinner, before dinner. We all know that can work to some extent, and I'm not suggesting it shouldn't be employed, that approach. But what happens if it goes suddenly after 3 hours? And suddenly now they're with their friends. And then you happen to be, as a parent, in an anxious mood. We know the best babysitter is a video game or is a video screen. So you say, okay, one time I'll let them have an extra candy. And that's what starts happening. But is there any deeper thing we can do here? Because what's our concern? That our children get addicted to this. They're not even interested in just playing with other kids without any of these gadgets. And then stimulation, it's just like better read a book. Who's going to be reading when you have all this? We all know visual stimulation is seductive, it's hypnotic. So these are the concerns, and they get deeper because they get a little older, and who knows what they're going to find online, and who they're going to meet, and what type of suddenly images are streamed to them, unwillingly. They suddenly end up in places they shouldn't be. I mean, the list goes on. So I'm thinking that, and this is not an easy solution, but at the end of the day, maybe we're now compelled, and this behooves us to do something we never did before, more than ever before. And that is to teach our children, why are you here in this world? When there was a time where we didn't have all these gadgets, then, pretty much a family unit, if it's a healthy family unit, learn from each other. You're preparing for Passover, for Shabbos, or whatever it is that you're doing. We're reading together, we're doing activities together. But with all these new machineries, that makes it so easy to just escape. Maybe we need to start teaching our children at a very young age, you are a godly gift to this world. You're a soul that came to this world. God gave us many tools, includes your arms and your legs, and your eyes and your ears. And now also machines and different instruments that help us find information faster and easier. But you have to know who you are. And really it's time to focus on that. Now I know it sounds philosophical and you can't speak that way to a 4-year-old. But still, every age you can speak to in a certain way. Help them find their inner identity. Something that parents, we all have not really necessarily done at the fullest sense of the word, and now we must do it. Because if not, they're going to find it elsewhere. The machines are going to take over, essentially. And they're going to find it online and stuff like that. And I say the same thing even though it's digressing a bit, but a bit about like sexuality. How do you talk to your children about it? Should you talk to them about it? So I was telling a few parents here who asked me this question, what do I think? What's my opinion? So I said, especially with all that's out there, and if you're not going to tell them, they're going to learn from the street, or they're going to learn from friends, or they're going to learn from online. Is that better? And everyone's going to come to that stage. Again, we're not talking about babies. We're talking about people reaching puberty, reaching their hormones start raging, and start getting older. So my thought was, a similar idea, I said, we have to teach our children, each according to their way, each in the right language, and always in a modest way and in a non-provocative way, and definitely not frightening way, that God blessed you with many different parts. You have eyes and ears and arms and legs and a heart and a mind, and He also blessed you with certain organs that will have the power to give birth. That's what it is. And there'll be an age where you will be old enough, and God will bless you, and you'll find your soulmate, and then these organs will be there for you to be able to use for the most sacred thing of all, to give birth to a child, to bring new life into this world. Your eyes can't do that, your nose can't do that. And that's why they're concealed, not because we're ashamed of them, not because they're ugly, and not because they can be sinful, but because they are very powerful. And the Holy of Holies in Judaism is always covered up, not because it's something to be ashamed of, because it's so pure. And the impure world, you need to have something that's it's the difference between privacy and secrets. It's not a secret, it's private. Certain things are intimate. Now, I don't say that this is a guarantee that's going to preempt all the issues, but it's a mindset that when children start being exposed to sexuality, they shouldn't pick up all the projected images of shame and guilt and punishment, and I can't live with it, I can't live without it, which becomes part of the whole problem. Unspoken, ugly secrets and stuff like that. They have at least a perspective that they heard from a younger age, that I have a sacred body, and my sacred body has to be protected by me, and everything has its time, which means a completely positive message. So it's similar to what I just said before about technology. Technology is neutral. It all depends how you use it. But if your person is not going to be a self-contained entity that has that identity of who am I outside of all these machines, then of course the machines are going to define you. Because what's the alternative? Where are you going to learn about yourself? Now, if the people developing ChatGPT can input this information, what I just said now, then ChatGPT will deliver someone say, what's the best way to deal with you, ChatGPT, with my 5-year-olds? So I would hope to believe that ChatGPT will respond, who says your 5-year-olds should be using me? First teach them about their souls. That would be an interesting twist, right? That technology, but that you need sincere people with integrity that are programming these programs. If people want to use it for, obviously, their own selfish reasons to make a few dollars, they're not going to tell that to you. Just like I always say, you never see a billboard that says, birth is God saying you matter. A billboard that tells you that you're indispensable. Because no one's making money on that. Why would they spend millions of dollars to tell you that? They want to tell you, Coke, that's it. If you drink Coke, you're going to live forever. I don't know, whatever the lines they use. You smoke Newport. I remember that ad. They're two beautiful faces, young people with the whitest teeth you ever saw. It says, alive with pleasure. Smoke Newport. And then in the bottom there's the box that says, cigarettes kill, carbon monoxide, pregnant women shouldn't, all that. That's the irony of our modern society. You pay millions of dollars for these billboards, and they tell you it kills you. But people don't read the little box. Even though you can read it, they look at the picture. So hopefully maybe some people, that's one of my talks I gave in Silicon Valley, was I said, you're responsible to implant into the social media and the technologies things that will make humans more human and more live up to higher values. But unfortunately, we all know money talks, and commercialization becomes the driving force. But that's where we come in. As parents, we need to protect and teach our children that you control your destiny, not marketers, and not machine makers, and not engineers, and not social media, and all of that. You control your destiny. And all these tools are tremendous tools that will only enhance who you are if you know who you are. That's how I would frame the conversation and discussion. And I think it resonates, because I know it resonates for me, because we all know it's true. I mean, at the end of the day, as sophisticated as any machine will be, even if we'll live on Mars and we'll have the most advanced technologies and be able to live for who knows how long because of medical breakthroughs, at the end of the day, the human soul will never be replicated. It will have tools that enhance it, and we can achieve we can fly quicker, reach more distant places. Everything can be accelerated. And I don't just mean quantitatively, also qualitatively. But there's something about that's uniquely human, unique soulfulness that is our domain. And the more you hold on to that, the rest becomes really just a sophisticated tool chest. It really is that. And it's not minimizing it, it's just putting it in context. So no question that's what it's about. And everything is like that. And just having that context, perspective, I think can change so much in how we see ourselves and those around us. I know it's hard if you've been shaped and defined by others and by the demands and expectations and by, yes, the machines around us. So it's hard to change your mindset because you're so used to it. We're like addicted to it. But you know what? I don't see an alternative. Hopefully we can give our children a chance before the machines take over, so to speak, to give them a sense of self before all that happens. I mean, I must say this because it's again and again. I'm holding my little grandson. He's 1 year old. His name is Chaim. The cutest kid. Like all of you have your cutest kids. It's a relative term, but it's cutest. For us, it's cutest. And I hold him and I know what I'm going to be talking about later, social media and this. He doesn't even know this language, doesn't know what it means. But he understands what a hug is. And he understands what love is. And I see his eyes exploring. And I envy it in a way. Because we're like on the other side of the curtain. He's on that side of the curtain. And you always think, can these two worlds meet? Can he maintain that innocence? Can he maintain that purity when he enters our world? Our, let's call it jaded world. Our corrupt world, or whatever you want to call it. And it just, it's sad in a certain way. You always say, maybe we can just bottle this but it doesn't work that way. Because I see my other grandchildren, they're already 5 years old and 10 years old. And not that they're still quite pure, but they already know what a phone is. So I see they're already entering our zone. And many of us think, oh, you know what, can't wait. All these children are just adults in the making. I see it the other way, honestly. I see the adult as just somebody that we can perhaps protect our children and protect the child within and retain that beauty and innocence with the sophisticated tools that we have. And then it's tools. A mind is tools, as all our faculties are tools. And I think you need to know the difference between a tool and the person who's using the tool. The difference between the captain of the ship and the ship. And with that, I think Pesach is a beautiful time. We have more time to think about these things even during meals and between meals, and you shoot a little pool and billiards. We become competitors here. I hustled him yesterday. Today he's going to get his vengeance. You want to make it interesting, like for money? Okay, that's just another machine, another distraction. And God should bless us each to have that yechidus, our inner soul, being the force that drives us all. Have that friend in your life that you can really just speak to without all the pretenses and calculations and machinations. And hopefully that beauty can shine forward. And when Yeshaya said, indeed, that the world will be filled with divine knowledge as the waters cover the seas, remember the emphasis is on the word divine, not just knowledge. You can have a lot of knowledge, but as if I can quote Oscar Wilde, one of the paragons of morality in the 20th century, that's a joke. But so Oscar Wilde said that there are people who know the price of everything and the value of nothing. Or another way of putting it is, we read more and more about less and less. And my favorite one is that it's not that today there's a lower rate of illiteracy because people can read and so on. He says the difference today and in the past is that today illiterate people know how to read. So there's data and information, and you can be filled with data and information, but still be clueless. And of course, you probably heard the one about, I'm just pouring on some extra jokes that I didn't use yet. So, in case, as the days pass, I want to make sure I use them all. That one I didn't think of till now, by the way. That was that unprepared joke. So there's the argument whether computers are male or female. You know that one? And there's a reason for each. So one of the reasons it's male, the women will say, is because a computer is filled with data and information, but it's clueless. That's one of them. The reason that it's female is the computer itself doesn't cost that much, but the accessories, Let's see that. There's a few others. I'm trying to remember what they are. Why are they male? Oh, once you turn them on, you can get anything you want. Okay. Okay, that's a little racy, right? Rabbi shouldn't be saying that. Which is why I'm not always a rabbi. Conveniently. What's the other one that it's male? Let's see. It's a whole list. I'm just trying to remember them all. But you get the idea. So the point is, why it's female? Because nobody understands them except each other. Computer language. Yeah, and my point that I wanted to make is that you could have a lot of information and be clueless. That's the point. You could have a lot of data. You could have machines galore, all the fanciest and most updated technology, and not even know what a heart is, what love is, and what soul is, and a purpose is. And we need to have that more powerful. Then all the tools will fall into place and be used in the right, proper way. So with that, great opportunity, Pesach, time of freedom. Freedom means freedom of the spirit above all. It's not just freedom that you can move around, but the freedom of discovering your inner identity. So everyone should be blessed. The really powerful continuing days of Pesach as we come to its conclusion. And then, of course, carry the Pesach energy into the rest of the year. And on a practical note, as I think I mentioned in that talk about an AI, for every time you use social media, every time you write an email, make sure you send 5 emails or 5 texts with something kind or something compassionate or something spiritual you share with others. Then you're beginning to use it for what the purpose of it is. And that's my concluding note. I appreciate your attention. This has been recorded and will be on social media soon. So if you want a recording, I'll be happy to share it with you. Just give me your contact info, which is a good opportunity. If you want to reach me, I'm easy accessible. meaningfullife.com is my website, and you can find a lot of material and information. And we have this growing YouTube channel. Subscribe, share, and please, if you have any questions, that you can always ask me while I'm here. I'm here through the whole holiday, and but afterwards as well, either email me or my office, and as I said, I'll be happy to try to respond. And God bless you all. Thank you so much.